Welcome back to our listeners. In this episode, we're going to be talking about everyday challenges for your autistic teenage boy. We're going to dive into specific challenges that they may face with ASD in daily living, including social interactions, academic struggles, and sensory issues. I'm Tiffany Herlin, a licensed clinical social worker, and today we have back Chris Brown. Do you go by Chris or Christopher?
Chris. My mom calls me Christopher.
Okay, I'm going to refer to you as Chris then, who's a licensed marriage family therapist from a residential treatment program for teenage boys called Discovery Ranch. Please remember that this podcast is not a replacement for therapy. Please always seek a mental health professional for your situation. Okay, let's dive into this.
Okay.
What are some common challenges, common social challenges faced by teenage boys with ASD?
So a lot of my students will come in, especially to the RTC setting, so the residential treatment setting, because they have been bullied. They have been maligned, and we've talked a little bit about this last podcast, but there is a struggle because they are mentally not keeping up with their peers. They are struggling to keep up with their peers. They're struggling to engage with the social activities that they have, that all teenagers start to participate in, sports, relationships, all that kind of stuff. And they tend to want to stay at home. They tend to want to be socially isolated or just have one or two friends. But they also struggle with perseverances.
Meaning what?
Perseverances are usually like focal points or points in the students or in the son's development where they just focus in on certain things. Like I have a student at another facility that just loved pirates. You could ask him anything about pirates and he knew everything about pirates.
Yeah.
The history of pirates, the different pirates that were in the Caribbean, all that kind of stuff. He was great at it. But that's all he wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And so he has peers that are like, well, I want to talk about this, or I want to talk about girls, or I want to talk about boys, or I want to talk about sports, or I want to talk about school. And he could not do that. So he was actually really kind of pushed to the side because he was just so awkward in that, because he would always try and change the subject back to himself. And it's that whole kind of that I'm the center of the universe and everything should be revolving around me. And that is one of the social... many of the social stuff that they struggle with.
And I'm sure our parents who are listening can relate with that.
Yes.
I think other common things are they can hyper-focus on trains, or you were saying
Yes.
D&D.
D&D I like D&D, and
Yeah.
I can talk about D&D, and I can talk about other types of D&D and stuff like that, but that's not all me. I can talk about a wide range of things, and I can also, for these boys to be able to focus in or to be able to have that social reciprocity of understanding your interests, that's hard for them. Because I'll bring in things that I think that are going to be interesting for the boys, and they'll look at it, and I've actually thought for weeks, I'm like, I'm going to bring this in, and they're going to look at it, and they're going to love it, and they'll look at it for like 30 seconds and be like, thanks, Chris. I'm like, don't you want to, you can borrow this, you can look at it.
This is cool.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. And they're like,
no thanks.
No thanks.
Going back for our listeners, if you don't know what D&D is, then you're not a true nerd, and it's actually really cool. I have kids my own kids who love it, but it's Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons.
I decided to throw that out there because I know some people are like, D&D, what's that?
Yes.
It's now cool, actually. So
it is now cool.
A lot of kids getting into it.
Yeah.
Okay. How can parents support their teenage son with social development and friendships? That's such a big challenge for our parents.
That is a big challenge. And I think being able to find other boys or other peer groups that are very similar to them. So other ASD boys, because that is, they're gonna need their own people. And I talked about this last time, is that because we have a whole group of ASD boys over at the ranch, they feel comfortable. They are exploring. They're talking about other things. And especially if you have two boys that really do like and want to be around each other, but they have two separate things. Like one boy likes magic cards and the other one likes D&D. They will actually start to move into other realms because that other boy that is their friend has that other interest. So they're actually able to kind of expand and kind of grow. And then you have another boy that comes in and has like a whole Pokemon fascination, and all of a sudden that starts to grow, and that starts to, so being able to find groups that are very similar is very helpful, because if you put ASD boys with neurotypical boys of the same age, you're going to have conflict, you're going to have neurotypicals are usually going to see them as awkward, different, funny, someone that they don't want to be around.
They ostracize them a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And then you also have the hygiene issues with these boys, and so the things that we're working on. And so the neurotypicals tend to see that very quickly, the stuff that we're working on. And so there's more pushing back, more bullying, more everything like that. And we don't want that. We want them to feel comfortable in their own skin and to be able to understand that they are unique and they can move out. They can ask other questions. They can try and be friends with other people and be okay with having that pushback.
Well, and I think that comes when they find their own people.
Yes.
When they find the people who accept them.
Yes.
In that group.
Yeah.
And a supportive group. I think sometimes, wouldn't you say that these kids can sometimes find themselves in kind of the outcast group that's maybe not the best influence, and parents start to worry about, how they are being influenced by that group because they are on the outskirts, right? So helping them find that kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but kids who will support them and help them thrive.
Yes.
Versus, we're the outcasts and we want to be the outcasts and we want to do those things that might get them in trouble and cause them to struggle more.
And that's a great point, because I think a lot of these kids really, first of all, they don't want to be ASD.
Yeah.
They don't want to be autistic, so they find other peer groups that are embracing certain things like drugs or alcohol or being a rebel or doing this or that, and they tend to gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden these kids have power. They have an identity. They have something that they want, and they're really a lot of these boys are very naive. They want to be friends with anyone, and they're willing to pick up these bad habits and these bad influences because they're so desperate for friends. And all of a sudden these people will say, hey, we'll accept you, but you gotta partake in all the stuff that we're doing. And then all of a sudden you have this influx of bad behaviors and rebelliousness and all that kind of stuff.
And exposure to things they may have not gotten exposed to before, but they're accepted, and we're wired to be connected. We're wired for connection as well.
Yes.
And these boys are too.
Yes.
And so when they get that, they'll take it on whatever level.
And they're really good at the whole montage of bad behavior is better than no behavior, or attention. Bad attention is better than no attention at all.
Exactly.
So they want the attention. They want something to grasp and to hold on to. And if these kids give them the attention that they want, they are going to eat it up. And so that's what we do at the bunkhouse at Discovery Ranch, is that we just encourage the play, encourage the interaction. Every Monday we go on a hike, because these kids they want to be socially comfortable and sit in the bunkhouse and just relax in the air conditioning and stuff like that. Yeah. And so every Monday for 2 hours, I put them all in the van and we go on a hike, and it's hard.
Get them out of their comfort zone.
Get them out of their comfort zone. But it's funny because they'll pair off, or they'll get in threesomes, and they'll just chat and talk on the way of hiking, and they'll enjoy the hike. And even though they're sweating and we're all dying out there, they've learned how to not complain about it, and they just enjoy ourselves. Like Monday, it was a little scary because just Monday, the kids in the front and I was right behind them. There was a group of 5 kids, and they're all chatting and enjoying and talking D&D and magic and all that kind of stuff. And they heard a rattlesnake, and it scared them, and they jumped up and they were screaming and yelling and stuff like that. But the rattlesnake was 15 feet away. It was far away, but it heard them, and they were so curious about it, and they were so interested about it. So we actually learned about rattlesnakes, and it was fun. I mean, I had one kid that wanted to make a belt out of the rattlesnake and try it, and I had to kind of hold him back a little bit and say, hey, we're not going near it. We stay on the trail. But yeah, it was fun to see them pair off and to enjoy each other's company and to get that pro-social behaviors.
Well, you're disconnecting them from their comfort zone and electronics and I know maybe
and air conditioning,
the things that are safe and you know, their safety net, and getting them outside. There's a bunch of books I've read on, about how disconnecting from electronics and the comfort zone and getting outside in nature is just so good for our teenage brains.
Yes.
Our kids' teenage brains, and we don't do it enough.
Yeah.
Instead of, being raised through play, kids are, now disconnecting.
Yeah.
And so it's so important that you're getting these kids out and connected with nature and then connecting with each other.
Yes. A lot of the new research that is coming out on the ASD and kind of what works for them and what creates these lasting changes is that outside activity. So being outside
important.
and doing things that are difficult, that are stressful, that are hard. So eating healthy is one thing. So it's funny because back in the day when I was growing up, I only got candy on Halloween and Christmas. But nowadays, I see candy all the time. I see these sugar sweets and stuff like that. And a lot of the research is showing that the limbic system craves that. It craves the sugars, the carbs, all these other kind of these things that are what the kids crave. And so when we go on these hikes, I'll have a snack at the very end. And they bring their water bottles, and I make sure that they get a big drink of water, and we go to very safe places and stuff like that. But we'll have this lesson at the end and halfway through and stuff like that. But we'll have a healthy snack. We'll have like a slim. Well, it's not that healthy, but it's protein.
Better than sugar and candy, right?
Exactly. It's a protein or some type of Nutri-Grain bar or something that is at least a little bit healthier than what they're used to, because we want to develop that prefrontal cortex. We want to develop that cognitive system, and that's, from what I've heard in the research, is that's what that part of the brain craves: the proteins, the fruits and the vegetables and all that kind of stuff. Not the carbs really so much, not the sugars and stuff like that. So going outside, eating healthy, exercise is huge for these boys. I mean, a lot of their progress is through that, and a lot of other things. But the exercise, the sunlight, the being outdoors, the hot, cold, all that kind of stuff, they thrive.
Yeah, you're going to help them rewire their brains doing all this. And I'm sure our parents are thinking, well, Chris, like, I can't get my kid off the couch and away from electronics and to eat healthy.
Yes.
Like, you're telling me all these things I probably should do, but that's going to be like pulling teeth.
Yes.
What do you say to those parents who are like, this is great stuff, Chris, but you don't know my kid?
Yeah, pull the teeth. It has to happen. There has to be change. And one thing I've noticed with these boys, and usually any of the boys or girls that I've worked with, is that side by side is better than just telling a kid, you got to do this. So saying, hey, you and I, let's go for a walk, let's walk the dog together. Instead of saying, hey, why don't you go walk the dog? Or, hey, you and I are going to wash the dishes together. Or we're going to go out and eat healthy. Or we're going to go and talk to this professional together to make some changes in their life. Or we're going to make goals together. Because a teenager or anyone, we don't want to be told what to do if we're a teenager.
Yeah.
And they're the same way. They need that side-by-side work that's paramount.
Well, one of the best sessions I had was putting on my running shoes and going running with one of my kids. And we had such a great session.
Oh, yeah.
When we were running side by side with each other. And this was a kid who didn't want to do anything but sit on the couch and not talk about anything.
Yes.
And it was amazing to see his capacity when he was running next to me. And same with my own kids. You know, in the summer, I get this, and I'm sure parents listening can feel my pain, like getting your kids to go outside and play and disconnect from electronics and the air conditioning. And, finally get my teenage daughter to be like, you're going for a walk with me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm walking every day. Come out. You got to at least get outside once and go for a walk. And I get her, and I get that it's hard. And it is pulling teeth, but you can stick with it and you can get your kids there.
Yes.
As painful as it is. But you're right, doing it with them.
Yes.
Not just you have to do this on your own. It's like, no, I'm going to do it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Let's shift gears a little bit. What about academic challenges that these teenage boys encounter?
So academic challenges usually, these students that come through our doors are very much, they like academics at times. So we've got this wide spectrum of kids. So there's the one side that really do like the structure, the being able to go and succeed and do all the stuff with math, science, English and stuff like that. They might have some outliers where they struggle. They do really well in some of the sciences and stuff like that, and the math and everything, but the English might be a struggle for them. And then you have students that are just scared of school. They've had failure after failure after failure, and they are just worried tremendously about going to school. So they have all this anxiety building up to go to school.
Maybe some school refusal at that point.
Yeah, wanting to sit out in the academic commons, which is our kind of our big area in the academic wing of Discovery Ranch. But what we do with the Discovery Ranch and the Bunkhouse Boys is that if we do have a student that is struggling, we do have a resource room. And I've handpicked, I mean, there was a time when we were coming over from Discovery Academy and going over here, the academic team was like, no, Chris, your kids will just fit right in with the other students. It'll be perfect. And I was like, no, I can't. I won't let that happen. I've got to have some of my teachers that I've worked with over at Discovery Academy come over with me, because they are special education people that know how to work with my students. And they're like, Chris, no. And it's funny because like a week later, they're like, Chris, I think we need some help here in academics. And I'm like, I told you. So we brought over the group. We created the resource room over there. I think it was already over there, but specifically designed for a lot of my students that need that extra support, that one-on-one, the hands-on.
But understand these kids.
But understand these kids and understand when they need to take a break, or when they're hungry, or when they're tired. Overstimulated, exactly. And and so they're really good at knowing that. I think when they get into the bigger classrooms, and Discovery Ranch, we don't have really big classrooms. We probably have, the biggest classroom is probably 6 to 7, maybe 8. But in the resource room, there's 3 students in there at a time. And it goes pretty well. I mean, the teachers are great. And we have blowouts every once in a while, but that's kind of normal for these kids.
And I feel like schools now are progressing enough, depending on where you live, obviously, in resources, but a lot of schools are recognizing that these kids have different needs.
Yes.
And that as a parent, you can advocate for your student who's on the spectrum's educational needs, right? You know, there's scenes for parents listening. If you're not already familiar with, I'm going to assume that most of my parents listening already know this stuff. Yeah. But just in case you don't, I mean, you can request to have what's called like a 504, which is where they have extra support. Yeah. And then there's also an IEP, which is individual education plan. Thank you. Where it has specific things like they might need more time on a test, or they need someone to read to them versus, help them if they're struggling with reading, or they may need a fidget toy, or instead of sitting on a chair, they might need one of those yoga balls, things like that these kids need, that maybe, rather than seeing it as a distraction or a limitation, it's actually going, and that they're not motivated and they don't want to learn, it's helping them say, okay, what can we get them so that they can thrive and they can learn? Yes. Does that make sense?
You're absolutely correct. I think parents really need to advocate for that. Yeah. Because I think schools do a really good job at education and teaching students, and if a student is starting to fall behind, especially in a high school or in a middle school, they'll fall behind because it's so big. There's so many kids, and then they'll blame the parents. They'll push it off to the parents and stuff like that. So parents need to advocate and be able to say, hey, my student needs extra things to be able to access the curriculum and to move forward. And if parents don't do that and just kind of say, oh, well, the kid's the problem, you just need to shape up and stuff like that, it's just going to hold him back even more and more and more. Yeah. So it's kind of scary if parents don't kind of step up and say, hey, I need to help.
Well, and if you're a parent listening and you haven't, there are ways to advocate and to get their needs met at school, for sure. How important is early intervention for addressing social challenges faced by teenage boys with ASD, and what resources are available for families who need it?
I usually work with some of the bigger states, so like California, New York, Florida, and stuff like that. And I know those states have a lot more services and abilities to be supportive. I have a cousin of mine that has a level 3 ASD student, or ASD son, and he is very much, they were able to do a lot of testing on him at a very, very young age. I think we can actually figure out if a student is autistic at probably 18, actually earlier than 18 months. I think they're actually...
Really? That is earlier now.
So they're looking at eye movement and being able to, because usually a neurotypical baby will look at the eyes and then look away and look at the eyes and look away. And usually the looking away is they're processing information or they're trying to calm themselves down.
Regulate.
Yeah, and regulate. So they'll look at the eyes. If an ASD baby will look at parts of the face, so it'll look all over, like at the ear or the forehead or the chin and stuff like that. So they actually can have the computer track where the baby is looking to be able to kind of see where, if that student is possibly going to go down the route of an ASD child. And so they can pick them out really quickly, and then they can get the services they need. Some school districts are better. Some school districts are not as good. Some have a lot of programs available. Some do not. And so being able to kind of start to pinpoint, especially at that young age. So you really kind of want to, driving through Utah, I see a lot of billboards. And there's a lot of billboards that say, if your child is hypersensitive to sound or light or anything like that, they might be autistic spectrum disorder. So please get the help you need. Contact these people. So if you see that, so if you see certain signs in a very young student, so if they're hypersensitive to certain sounds, if they don't like textures, if they struggle with play, if they're fidgety or
overstimulated easily.
Yeah, if they cry a lot, or they're just too calm. Actually, if they're just they don't cry, they're just really kind of too relaxed. You always want to ask your pediatrician and kind of start that process of finding out what's going on, because there is kind of milestones that they have to reach, and if they don't reach those milestones, then you want to ask those questions to kind of start the process of seeing. I mean, we've also seen that if women who give birth are later on in life, they're in their 40s or 50s, they tend to have more ASD kids. And so if you're older, know that we probably have to find out if that's a possibility.
Well, and I think it's important to find this out earlier because it's going to save our parents a lot of heartache, right?
Yes.
Because, again, I talk about a family member being diagnosed in their 40s. I mean, she struggled so much with her parents not understanding her and accepting her, just with her ADHD, that it was painful. Like there was a narrative she grew up with that she wasn't smart enough and she wasn't loved enough and, didn't belong. And so helping our parents recognize this early and realize there's nothing wrong with your child. Yeah. They just process things differently. That's really what neurodiverse means, is that their brain is wired differently and processing things differently, and they need different things.
Yes.
Then it's going to limit those meltdowns and the behaviors. Not that they won't have them.
Yeah.
They're still going to have them.
Yes.
But it will help the parent have a different set of perspective and glasses on.
Yeah.
And then different tool set to know how to meet those needs so that it's a little easier to navigate.
Yeah.
It won't be easy, but a little easier, right?
Yeah. I always tell my parents, especially after Discovery Ranch, if they're going home, the prognosis or what we're going to be looking at for their son is that they're going to have maybe 6 to 9 months of really good behavior, being able to go to school, having probably little meltdowns here and there, struggles here, but then we're going to have a meltdown. Their teenage years, they're going to have
Count
a meltdown.
on it.
Yeah. 6
this
months,
is normal.
meltdown, and then another good 6 months, meltdown. It's a normal for these teenage boys to be able to do that, and for them to be able to say, okay, so that's not a setback. And I said, no, that's normal, and that's a good thing, because he's able to maintain it for 6 months, 9 months, meltdown. 6 months, 9 months, meltdown, and that's normal for, especially coming out of an RTC or doing all the work he's done. That's who he is. He's going to have these meltdowns.
Well, when you can help parents front load and know what to expect, they're less likely to hit that panic button and to also fall into that limbic system of fight, flight, or freeze, and then react in a negative way, right?
Exactly.
It's like, okay, no, I was prepped for this. I knew this was coming. This is how we're going to handle it, and we're going to get through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for them to know that as he reaches adulthood, as these young men reach adulthood, the brain does settle down. The brain will calm down. The brain will settle down. The hormones get stabilized. They're no longer going through puberty.
It's not going to last forever.
It's not going to last forever. It's just these struggle teenage years where things are going all wonky on the young man's body and his mind and stuff like that we need to protect and to keep him safe and to teach him how to make forward progress.
I love helping any of my parents that I work with realize, like, Teenage years are hard because the brain specifically seeks out high-risk behavior.
Yes.
They want to push boundaries. They're going to pull away. Like helping our parents realize like, this is all normal stuff. And and their brain's not fully developed and they don't have the executive, functioning skills yet. So they're going to be kind of idiots behind the wheel and do stupid things with their friends.
Yeah.
Now, we want to limit the high risk, right?
Yes. Oh, yes.
But allow them to take some high risk in a safe environment, like helping our parents understand that that's a normal teenage development. Plus, let's throw on neurodiversity on top of this. Like, you're just going to equip our parents with more tools in their toolbox.
And to let them know as well that, especially the teenage brain, the brain develops from the back to the front. And we want this part of the brain to really kind of develop. And so we're still kind of waiting for this part to really kind of mature and to grow. And that's usually 18, 19, 20 years old. So we just have to keep them safe, especially these kids that come into residential treatment centers.
Well, and our kids are on the spectrum sometimes that's later than 20.
Yes.
So helping our parents realize, like, yes, he may have turned 18 or even 20, but it doesn't mean he's functioning at a 20-year-old level that you would expect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And maybe he's not ready to go to college and live on his own, even though that's what society tells you he's supposed to do, you know? Yeah. What social skill groups or program can you recommend for families and their sons with ASD?
It's definitely determined by what is in your area. So definitely something in your area. So there's a lot of, and I've talked to other parents, there's a lot of social pragmatics groups out there. And they actually have groups where they learn about these social skills and these social reciprocity and all that kind of stuff that's going to be so important for them. But also to have a therapist that knows what to do and kind of how to help that young man or young woman to be able to navigate that social skills and be able to navigate all that kind of stuff. So social pragmatics is huge. A neurodiverse specialist was huge. But just being able to reach out and find those resources in your area is going to be huge. So I always I'll have parents say, what can I do or how can I do? So I'll actually give them I'll do some research on Google and stuff like that and find a telephone number and say, just call this number and then start the process. If they're not the people, just say, hey, where can you lead me next? And where can you lead me next? And find those groups and find those social circles that you can develop and find that will be helpful. We actually have at every single program that I've worked at, there's little Facebook groups of parents that all get together and they all chat about the facility and stuff like that. Some good, some not so good, but they all chat, and they're really good at being very supportive of each other. And they are resource bound. So you'll have one mom or dad that has been at that facility for a year and a half, and they have all the knowledge and stuff like that. They know who to talk to. They know where to go. And then all of a sudden you have a brand new parent come in and say, hey, I need help. And then this mom is like, I got the information. Or this dad says, awesome. I know what to do. So be part of those Facebook groups, especially if you're at an RTC or some type of therapeutic boarding school.
So you're saying reach out.
Yes.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
You don't have to be on an island. You don't have to live in the shame that maybe you're feeling that you're not a good enough parent and you're failing, because you're not.
Yeah.
Either you are a good enough parent. This is just such a complex issue.
Yes.
And you are not alone. I can't say that enough. You know, if you're sick of hearing it, I'm sorry, but you're not.
You're not.
You're not alone in this.
No, it's amazing how many resources are out there.
Yeah.
And you just have to go out there and get them.
Yeah. And help your son or daughter find those resources as well, and help them succeed and thrive versus, feeling like they keep falling behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. What role does technology play in social interactions for teenagers with ASD? This is a big one.
This is a big one, because a lot of my boys that come into the ranch have Xbox addictions, PlayStation addictions, computer addictions. They're playing all the time. They're trying to relax. They're trying to hit that relax. And we talked a little bit about stress, relax, and how if there's too much stress, then they go limbic. And if there's too much relax, they don't make any progress. They just kind of sit on it, and they want to sit on it. Unfortunately, when the research has shown that Xbox, PlayStation, all these video games are actually stimulating. So it's actually stimulating the brain. So when you go and ask the student or the son or daughter to get off their Xbox or their PlayStation, they get mad at you because they're stimulated playing the games. And so parents need to be very careful in limiting that and being able to say, hey, only this time after all these chores and after all these homework things are done. And I know I hear the horror stories during COVID where parents had to work or to do stuff in another room, and they allowed their son or daughter to just get on the computer or just to interact with the computer, and then all of a sudden now we have the addiction piece. So they're stimulated to play these games because it's fun. There's a methodology to it. There's rules to it, and they like that.
Well, not only to mention, sometimes there's that social piece too, right?
Yes.
I don't have to read body language. It's easier.
Exactly.
Much less confrontation, less rejection.
Exactly.
It's an easier path of resistance to connect with someone.
Exactly. And it's fun. And it's fun, and they enjoy it. And it does go with that whole premise of I'm trying to avoid life, and life is difficult and life is stressful. I don't want that. Video games are fun, but they are stimulating. So you're actually throwing a little bit of gas on the fire when they're playing the video games. We want healthy, because I hate to say this, I'm almost 50 years old, and I like video games every once in a while. I play like every day when I come home. I'll play a half an hour on my Xbox and enjoy it, and then get off and do some other stuff. And I enjoy that time.
Decompression.
Yeah, that decompression. And I'm using that because I worked hard. I got home, and I'm just going to decompress a little bit.
But your brain can process, like, here's my limit.
Yes.
Here's, versus a neurodiverse brain, they don't have that awareness and that concept of, I've been on for 3 hours.
Yeah. So it's the same way with a full refrigerator. A lot of these kids will come into the ranch very heavy set. They're very unhealthy. They've eaten out of house and home because they're stuck in the house during COVID and stuff like that. And so they have food addictions now. So we have this electronic addictions, food addictions, and then when the parents are trying to put limits on the kids, then we have the violence, then we have the aggression, then we have the pushback. Yes,
yes.
We have. It's crazy.
Well, it's interesting you bring this up. There's a book that is trending that any parent should honestly listen to. I don't know if you've read it, but the Anxious Generation.
I have not.
It's so good. I just finished reading it. It's basically about how we've gone from, I talked about this, I think, previously, we've gone from a play-based childhood to an online electronic-based childhood,
yes.
Where parents have lived in kind of this fear of like, well, if I let my kids roam about in the streets at night, they're going to get kidnapped, or they're going to, get hit by a car, or these scary things are going to happen to them. So they've limited this going out and having this normal. You and I could probably tell stories about being out till the street lights come on, right? Yeah. And how normal that was. And we didn't have cell phones, and parents didn't know where we were and what we were doing. But now, as even myself as a parent, it's like, well, where are you going to be? Whose house are you going to be at? And how long are you going to be there? And you better come home at this time, right? Yeah. We live in kind of this fear. But yet we don't limit their online activity. Yeah. Because it's easier to be like, but the online activity is not built for kids.
Yes.
It's built for adults.
Yeah.
Social media, video games aren't necessarily built for kids, right? Yeah. They are built for our adult brains to set our own limits. There aren't limits on it and what they can be exposed to. So it just talks about how it's rewired our kids' brains and caused them to be disconnected, more anxious, we're seeing more mental health issues. And so you throw that on top of a neurodiverse brain, and the impact it's having. Yeah. I recommend it to you, to all our listeners. And he gives... talks about like the research and then what we can do differently as a society and what we need to be doing differently. Yeah.
So, the Anxious Generation. Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah. We'll post about it and link it. Oh, nice. It's such a profound book and so much based on the research that they're just now finding. Yeah. And
I also think it goes back to like our generation was, I think we were considered the feral generation. We were out in the streets, we were out playing, we were out until the streetlights turned on. And I was climbing on people's houses and exploring and doing all this crazy stuff as kids.
I was building climbing trees and building, tree huts and things like that.
And then we have now parents that are very protective and very kind of closed off and very kind of like, I'm going to make sure that you're safe. and you're going to be safe in this room with the Xbox or with the PlayStation. And
that's the babysitter.
That's the babysitter.
Yep.
Instead of being able to say, you know what, you and I are going to go to the park together. You and I are going to go out to run together or walk the dog together or do something outside together.
Go out in nature, like you were talking about earlier. Which they're finding from research. There's another book I read about just how nature wires a kid's brain alone, and how we need that stimulation.
Yes.
And that, they call it, I don't know if I'm using this term right, but it's like, it's a play-based, but there's risk involved, but it's like not overly, I'll have to find the term. I'm going blank on what it is, but it's how important it is that kids do take that kind of risky play outdoors, but that's going to put them at real risk, right?
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yeah.
Like, so a lot of the, you're talking about rock wall climbing and hikes, and things that is really good for a kid's teenage brain, especially a kid who's neurodiverse and they need it. So we're allowing them to explore in a safe environment.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, bike riding, swimming, hiking, all this other stuff that ASD kids struggle with already because of their visual, spatial, and kind of all the stuff that's going on with their brains. They need all that sports, activities, and stuff like that that really kind of stimulate the brain, because that's an area that they struggle with. And so being able to encourage that, instead of having the electronic stuff monitor and control that.
Which doesn't have limits. And as parents, it's constantly evolving, and it's hard to keep on top of.
Exactly.
And it's just a world that we're not, in fact, from the book I was reading, he refers to it as like sending our kids to Mars.
Yes.
We don't know the consequences of shipping our kids off to Mars and what that might mean for their development, right? He's just saying it's such an unknown territory, and it's hard to keep up with, and there aren't limits for kids on it.
Yeah.
So, again, if we could shift as a society, we could not only help kids who are on the spectrum and neurodiverse, but just all of our kids.
Yes.
Because I guarantee, if you're a parent listening to this, you've had struggles with technology and getting our kids to disconnect from it and to engage with the real world.
No.
Because technology, even as an adult, is hard to manage at times.
Yeah. No, and I feel very bad because parenting is a struggle. I mean, especially in this day and age with all the different social influences and all the different other things out there, because it's kind of a little scarier world than when we were growing up. And to be able to say, hey, I want to keep you safe, and the house is safe, I can lock the doors, I can put stuff like that. And there's times when we have to encourage our kids and our students and our sons and daughters and stuff like that to take some very healthy risks, and to be stressed out a little bit, and to have some social interactions, and to go on a bike ride. And I mean, I would bike ride, and we would fall off the bike and get all skinned up, and that was something that happened all the time.
This summer, I shifted my perspective as a parent. I've been encouraging my teenage daughter to be like, go find your friends, get on your bikes, and go somewhere. I don't care where. Go ride it down to Dairy Queen and get she's like, that's kind of far. I'm like, you're going to be fine. I trust you. Like, just get out of the house and go do something fun. And she, like, this is kind of new to her. She's like, oh, like, are you sure, Mom? I'm like, yes, please. Go have fun with your friends.
Yes.
Get out, connect with the real world. Go take some risks that aren't, obviously going to put you in danger. And it's really shifted my perspective as a parent myself. So in our next episode that's coming up, we are going to dive more into the challenges of parenting a teenage boy and what resources are available. I'm grateful that you talked about our parents reaching out on Facebook groups, reaching out to other parents, school districts, therapists who are specialized in neurodiversity, because they're out there. Sometimes if you're in a rural area, they're harder to find. But thank goodness for the internet and connection on the internet. That is the one positive, thing about technology that we have and that we should be using, especially for our parents. So if you're listening, parents, you're not alone. There are resources available, and we're going to dive more into what we can do to help support you as a parent with this challenging task that you have to raise a student, and not a student, but a son who's neurodiverse.
I love it.
And you're not alone. I'm going to say it again.
Yeah, there's definitely resources out there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.